for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football.
Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Nearly 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 17th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 23 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Brian Eikenberry and Andy Hall.
For some of you, this week is do or die. Week 13 is a big one. No matter if you play your fantasy championship in week 16 or week 17, lots of teams right on the cusp of that coveted playoff spot, and we want to help you grab one. Because once you're in the playoffs, everybody's back at zero, and everybody has a shot at the title, even you. Welcome to 515 Fantasy Football. Andy Hall gearing up for some playoff runs myself. My co-host Brian Eikenberry, assume you're doing the same.
Yeah, this is one of them weeks where it looks like I'm going to be in the playoffs in about 60% of my leagues, but one of those is a cliffhanger, so I'm going to need to heed my own advice and really take a look at my lineup and do some hard thinking to ensure myself that last spot.
Yeah, I mean, even if you have a playoff spot already wrapped up, Brian, it's important to win here in Week 13. You're jockeying for position in the playoffs, too. It's not just about getting in. It's about where are you going to be. Will you get a first-round bye, for example?
Yeah, it's always something you need to kind of look at and prepare for, and then, kind of cheer against some of your other competitors, hoping that you get paired up. If you're the 3 seed, you're going to get paired up with that 6 seed, and maybe that 6 seed is someone that you can beat or have beat, and they're just going to luck their way into it.
Hey, anything can and will happen in the fantasy playoffs. No matter how you found us, iTunes, Stitcher, the Libsyn website, or on our radio home at 1350 ESPN Radio in Des Moines. We can't thank you enough for making our first year the massive success it has been. By all accounts, Brian, we've been giving our listeners some very solid intel week to week, and I'll tell you, felt very good about Week 12, especially after I pretty much nailed all the Thanksgiving games.
Yes, you did. You had a good week. I took a couple on the chin, but that's why this is a group effort, so we finished up with plus 38. So we were back up into the 30s again. We were looking kind of sharp and a little something to spread the peacock feathers.
A lot of ground to cover in a short period of time. All the matchups and grades on the fantasy-relevant players, the pop quiz, the bargain bin, and more. But we begin, as we always do, with some headlines of fantasy note. We head to Dallas. Tony Romo is back on IR, having rebroken his clavicle. His season appears to be over. Seahawks tight end Jimmy Graham also finished his season with a tendon tear in his knee. Patriots tight end Rob Gronkowski may only miss 1 week with that PCL strain of his. Wide receiver Danny Amendola limited on Wednesday. He should return for Sunday, which is great news for the Patriots, and particularly those of you that have been wondering whether or not you can continue rolling with Tom Brady. Dolphins have fired offensive coordinator Bill Lazor, which could be great news for Lamar Miller owners. Feels like we had this conversation back when they got rid of Joe Philbin, Brian.
Yeah, it's just one of the things, coaching head scratchers. Here we are telling teams how to run their business, but when you see Lamar Miller, what do you have, 4 or 5 carries last week? What are you doing? I don't even care if you're behind 50 points. You still should at least run the ball more than that, especially to someone like Miller.
Also in Dolphins news, wide receiver Rashard Matthews out indefinitely with multiple fractured ribs, and that should give their rookie Parker more of an opportunity to step in and see what he can do. Colts head coach Chuck Pagano says Frank Gore is, quote, beat to crap, unquote. There's a classic from Pagano. Yeah,
that's something I seen that headline. I laughed and I just, wow, so much for that pitch count you were going to put him on. He's at the five highest carries in the league.
It's not good news either, considering Ahmad Bradshaw placed on season-ending IR as of last week. Also, Andrew Luck sounds like he will start when he's ready, possibly here in the next couple of weeks. The last report I saw was that he is back at practice throwing and feeling pretty good. The Cardinals running backs are also beat to crap, by the way. Chris Johnson has a fractured tibia. Andre Ellington, a turf toe injury, both doubtful for this weekend, which means it's David Johnson time. The former UNI Panther will get to show what he can do when the backfield is all his. Eagles quarterback Sam Bradford considered day-to-day with a shoulder ailment. It sounds, Brian, like they're going to roll with Bradford. Mark Sanchez just wasn't cutting the mustard.
I don't think it matters either way. It's just one of those teams where so much hype, so much excitement, and it's just been a completely deflated football.
Also in Philly, running back Ryan Matthews still in the league's concussion protocol. He's missed the past couple of weeks. Same with tight end Zach Ertz. He's 50-50 to return for Week 13. So far, it's not looking too good. Bengals tight end Tyler Eifert dealing with a pretty severe neck issue. His status for this weekend is up in the air. After further review, Ben Roethlisberger actually did suffer a concussion in Week 12. He's questionable for Sunday. Tight end Heath Miller dealing with a rib injury that may lead to some time off. Browns quarterback Josh McCown, he'll miss the rest of the season with a clavicle injury, very similar to what Tony Romo has been going through. And it was just announced today, Brian. Guess who's under center for the Cleveland Browns this weekend?
I honestly don't even remember that guy's name. Like, I read it, but I don't even remember it right now.
Austin Davis.
Austin Davis. Perfect. He is not my bargain bin.
No. In Jacksonville, Jags wide receiver Allen Hurns, who had a pretty nasty spill, fell on his face in last weekend's game, was taken to the hospital. He will probably miss this week due to a concussion. He is now in the league's protocol. Into the matchups, Brian, you've got the Thursday nighter.
All right, into this Lions and Packers matchup here. Looking to make some Vikings fans real happy as a Lions fan. If I would have told you that the Packers would have had the 22nd ranked passing offense in Week 13, you'd think I was crazy. But it turns out I am right. Aaron Rodgers gets a B+ because of the Lions defense. I don't think he's going to repeat the prior performance between these two. He's probably going to have a lot better game than he did. I think he had like 7 points in most fantasy leagues the last time these two met. Someone who is going to have good grade, Eddie Lacy, A. James Starks, B+. I think these two are going to have a good 1-2 duo against the Lions here, who tend to give up a lot of points and a lot of yards. So watch for Lacy Starks to have a good day. If you have either one, I'd give them a go. Wide receivers of note, Randall Cobb, B. James Jones, B+. Devontae Adams, B-. You heard that right. Cobb, B. Jones, B+. Adams, B-. I don't think there's going to be enough passes to go around. And I think, for what it's worth, Adams, I think they're going to start just looking away. His drops are just killing him, and that's just the way it's going to go. So I think that's going to benefit Jones more here. I think his style is weak against what the Lions are trying to do here. Tight end Richard Rodgers, he's going to get a B-. I believe that the Lions are going to give up TDs on the ground or to the tight end spot this week. On the Lions side of the ball, they have something to prove, and that's scoring points on your fantasy roster, as Thanksgiving was showing you. Quarterback Matt Stafford, coming off that huge day, I called it. I gave him an A. Probably not going to have the 5 touchdowns here, but a B+ for Stafford. I'm on the fence there. I think they're going to have a shootout here with a Green Bay revenge game. Running backs Joique Bell and Amir Abdullah, both B-. I don't think they're there yet in terms of declaring the running game a success. I know they've been running it more now, but it's just not something you can count on. If you did have to start a running back, I'm going to go with Theo Riddick. He was my sneaky bargain bin a while ago, and he's been helping out them PPR leagues like a champ. So B for Theo Riddick. Wide receiver Calvin Johnson, he's going to pull some crazy coverages. The Packers know him well, so B+. I'm going to give B for Golden Tate. Watch for the resurgence of Tate here. He has a good shot with Jim Bob Cooter, who's proving his name isn't the only game in town. It's much more aggressive play calling. Wide receiver Lance Moore, B-. He's been getting some great targets and great opportunity. He has more touchdowns and more yards per catch than Golden Tate does. Tight end Eric Ebron. If you have been watching, there's no tight end love in Jim Bob's offense, so Ebron's going to get a C at best.
My first matchup, the Jets and the Giants. Begin on the Jets side. Ryan Fitzpatrick, a B+. No team allows more passing yards per game than the Giants do, 309 on average. And while Fitzmagic isn't known for putting up those kind of gaudy statistics in terms of yardage, I do think he'll take full advantage of the mismatches his pass catchers possess in this game. Chris Ivory, is a B+. The Giants are allowing 4 yards per carry on the season, and they'll get a face full of Ivory this week, who's averaging just over 4 yards per carry himself on the season. This should be a near 100-yard game from him with at least one decent shot at a touchdown. For the receivers, Brandon Marshall is an A. The Giants are the league's most generous defense against opposing wide receivers in terms of yardage, but they've only allowed 20 passing touchdowns on the season. Marshall should be in line for a big game from a yardage standpoint, and if he should happen to score, consider it a cherry on top. Eric Decker is a B+. I think he may be the more likely candidate to reach the end zone at least once against a Giants defense that typically gives up between 1 and 2 scores per game to opposing wideouts. I don't think I'd consider anybody from a tight end standpoint for either team in this matchup. Will Tye has looked like an emerging talent for the Giants, but I'm not sure I would go there just yet. Speaking of the Giants, Eli Manning, a B- in this game. The Jets have shown some chinks in the armor as of late, but remain a relatively formidable opponent against the pass. The health of Darrelle Revis will be especially important to watch here, but this figures to be a high-volume game for Eli regardless. As far as the runners go, the only one I'm going to give a starting grade to, Shane Vereen. I give him a C here. Jets have shown that while they're the league's stingiest run defense, they do at times allow decent yardage totals to pass-catching backs like Vereen, who is the only Giants back, like I said, that gets a starting grade. The rest of them you can leave on the bench. Odell Beckham's a B-. With Revis in the lineup, Beckham's owners may not see a lot of production. He's been about as close to a true shutdown corner as the NFL has seen this season. If he sits this week, I bump Odell up to a B+. It sounds like Revis is going to give it a go this weekend, and if he does, I'm sticking with a B- for Beckham. Ruben Randall is a C, not a great play for a guy whose fantasy success typically depends on a plus matchup. He's not getting one here. As I said, don't see any viable tight end options for either team, really. I'm leaving them all on the bench.
All right, on to the Cardinals-Rams here. Carson Palmer, he's battling to keep that number 2 seed in the playoff scenarios and is going to get a tough defensive matchup, but's likely only going to need about 14 points to secure the win. Palmer's going to get a B up against the 8th best passing defense in the league. He's likely going to have to pass a lot to be effective against the Rams defense. They aren't the greatest on paper, but they are good at turnovers and capitalizing on those mistakes. Running back David Johnson likely going to get the nod with Chris Johnson on the IR and Ellington with his turf toe. There's no tiff toe. There's only turf toe. I will give him a decent B. You have to think the guy like Get Off My Lawn's Arians, he's going to probably tend to shift to the pass and not have to put the game in the rookie's hands. He's not that kind of coach. He's proved that in the beginning of the season. So he likes to favor vets over rooks. So be cautious. He might be throwing the ball a little bit more this game. Wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald is a B-. 1 touchdown in the last 6 games. And last game he only had 60 yards on 10 catches. He's going to be going up against definitely a tougher defense this week. So B- for Fitzgerald. Floyd's going to get a B. John Brown, B. I feel like Brown is due for the bigger game here because of his position and where others will be playing Fitz, and the Rams sending an extra blitzer there. No tight end of value for me on any fantasy football roster for the Arizona Cardinals. On to the Rams. Doesn't matter who's the QB here, be it Case Keenum or Nick Foles. It's just not starting either one, and neither should you. Either one who goes is going to get the seed. It's not enough horsepower to make a fantasy football roster. Running back Todd Gurley, coming off his worst performance of 19 yards, will likely going to get the same treatment here. The Cards are the 3rd best against the run and will remind Gurley that he is still a rookie. B- for Gurley. Breaks my heart to say that, but B-. Wide receiver Tavon Austin and Kenny Brett are both going to get B- as well. It's not their fault. They're using a variety of weights, but it's just a tough Cardinals defense. And, they're going to be prepared for the little sneaks and the reverses and all the fun stuff that help get those guys their points. They were never breakout, and they're just too tough to rely on, and now they have a bad matchup. Also, Jared Cook not getting a mention for a grade on my roster.
Good.
Just for you, man.
Forget about you. Forget about you, Jared Cook. On to Atlanta, Tampa Bay. On the Falcons side, Matt Ryan is a B. I still can't figure out whether there's something seriously wrong with him this season, but in a matchup like this against a Tampa defense that ranks right in the middle of the pack against opposing quarterbacks, I give him an average grade. and expect, 225 to 250 yards passing, 1 or 2 touchdowns through the air. The key to Ryan's success are eliminating turnovers, particularly in the red zone. They've killed him this year. The running game, Devontae Freeman is back this week. I give him a B+. Tough sledding upon his return from the concussion he suffered early on in Week 11. Freeman's true value in a matchup like this is his pass-catching potential. I still like him from a volume standpoint, but the Bucs have been very good against opposing runners, allowing only 5 touchdowns on the season. Tevin Coleman, a C-. He probably earned a few extra touches with his performance in Week 12 against the Vikings, but remains the backup to Freeman. For the receivers, Julio Jones is an A-. Despite a likely shadow from Bucs star corner Altron Werner in this one, I like Jones to bounce back from an extremely disappointing Week 12 in which he was virtually shut out by Vikings corner Xavier Rhodes. He ate these Bucs alive in the team's first meeting earlier this season. Roddy White is a C. He's still not seeing the volume of targets nor the explosive playmaking ability he used to possess. He's a desperation flex only. Leonard Hankerson's a C. A touchdown is the only way to salvage his day, which of course is possible, but I'd bet more on either Jones, Freeman, or even Tammy before I'd bet on Hankerson. Speaking of Tammy, he's a B-. Lots of mouths to feed for Matt Ryan, who hasn't been himself this season. Tammy has a shot at grabbing one for a score in the red zone, but I wouldn't expect a ton of receptions or yardage from him here. On the Tampa side, Jameis Winston, a C+. I like his receivers too much to consider benching him this week, but the Falcons have been a top 3 defense against opposing quarterbacks with as many INTs as touchdowns allowed on the season. As far as the running game goes, Doug Martin is a B. Atlanta typically allows less than 100 yards per game to opposing backs, who average only 3.7 yards per carry on the season against them, but they have given up 13 rushing touchdowns, which is among the league's worst. Martin definitely got a shot this week, no doubt. Charles Sims, a C+. He's getting some carries, but primarily does his damage as a pass catcher. He should get a few looks in this matchup. As far as the receivers go, Vincent Jackson, the higher grade here for me. I'm giving him a B. The Falcons have only given up about 1 touchdown pass per game. Jackson seems to be the most likely candidate among the wide receiver core to get it done against a defense that surprisingly is top 10 in nearly every category on the defensive side of the ball. Mike Evans, a B-. The targets and opportunity for good yardage will be there, but the scoring chances may not be against the Falcons, who have emerged as a solid pass defense this season. Tight end Cameron Brate, I give him a B. Austin who? No matter what becomes of the talented youngster named Safarian Jenkins, the Bucs may have found an even better player for the tight end position in Brate, who is reliable and has Winston's eye near the end zone.
I would definitely agree with you there. Brate is a champ, and I think he's going to work out well, so expect one of them to get traded in the offseason.
Bam.
On to the Seahawks-Vikes here. This is a big game. Russell Wilson proved why he can win Super Bowls last week. Watching that game, it was just awesome. It was a great game to watch for football, and now they're going to go into another good game here against the Vikings. So I'm going to give Russell Wilson a B. They go up a much better defense this week, so he's not going to have that big fantasy numbers that he had last week. So temper your expectations there on Russell Wilson. Running back Thomas Rawls, B+. Watch for him to be the focus and carry the workload and to compete with AP for the offensive showing of the week. By the way, Rawls is averaging 5.6 yards per carry. Wide receiver Doug Baldwin, he had his day in the sun and was suddenly added to people's fantasy roster, proclaiming him to be the next greatest thing. That's why you're listening here, friends. He is fool's gold. B- for Baldwin. You have to use the whole season to judge. You can't do it off of one game. Don't overreact. He had his big game. Now it's Curse's turn this week. If you look at history, they kind of flip-flop back and forth. B+ for Curse, as I think he's going to get 8 or so targets and likely the touchdown against Minnesota secondary that can give up plays to the number 2 wide receivers. They also have to cover now tight end Luke Wilson, who has NFL experience, and he is the only one to catch, and he was the only player to catch a touchdown in the Seattle-Dallas game. Tight end Luke Wilson is also 6 feet 5 inches, so a very tough cover there, someone they don't have a lot of tape on. Quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, he's going to have to keep the chains moving and have a great game, as AP may not be able to do it all on his own. B- for Teddy Bridgewater, as he is a serviceable quarterback, and he's pretty good scrambling around the pocket, but he's going up against a pretty good defense. Running back Adrian Peterson, he's going to run into the fourth best run defense, so give him a B this week. He's been having a killer year in terms of yardage, but he's becoming increasingly frustrated, and you can see it on the field. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs, C-. Richard Sherman on the coverage there. Wide receiver Mike Wallace, C+. Tight end Kyle Rudolph, C as well. You see the theme here with all the pass catchers? They're all getting Cs. That's it for Minnesota. It's either AP or nothing. Good teams aren't always good in fantasy football.
San Francisco at Chicago. On the Niners side, Blaine Gabbert is your starting quarterback, and that's about all I have to say about that. The Bears have given up the second fewest passing yards in the league behind Denver, so I'm not going there. Sean Drawn is the starting running back. He gets a C+ here. The Bears yield the fourth most rushing yards per game, but on the season have only allowed 3 rushing scores. Drawn should be considered in your flex, however, due to his presence in the passing game. I especially like him if you're in a PPR league. The receiver of note here, only one, Anquan Bolden. I give him a B. Blaine Gabbert targets Bolden a ton in between the 20s, which is great for targets, receptions, and yardage, but typically not so much a good play for touchdown opportunities, unfortunately. Who does get the touchdowns? The tight end position. Vance McDonald. I give him a B here. He's almost exclusively a red zone weapon. He's huge. Gabbert loves him. Garrett Selleck is banged up. The gig is his. I kind of like him, to be honest with you, going forward. On the Bears side, Jay Cutler's a B. The Niners give up on average 277 yards passing per game, nearly 2 passing scores. I'm confident Cutler can match that at the very least on his home turf. San Francisco is terrible on the road this season against the pass. The running game, Matt Forte gets a B+ here. Chicago looks to employ that split backfield, giving Forte a slight majority of snaps and touches per game over Langford. The Niners allow an average of 1 rushing touchdown per game. The odds say this may be Forte's week. Langford's the B- here. He'll get his opportunities, but unless he scores a touchdown, he's not going to put up massive numbers for your fantasy squad. The receivers, Alshon Jeffrey, an A-. He's in line for a very solid game here considering the matchup. If he's even close to 100%, which it sounds like he is because he was taken off the injury report, don't hesitate to plug him in against a leaky Niners pass defense. Marquise Wilson is a C. He's probably Cutler's 4th option on most passing plays with Jeffrey, the Forte-Langford combo, and the Miller-Bennett combo out ahead of him, but he still has the potential to connect with his quarterback on some long ones. Speaking of the tight ends, Zach Miller is a B for me this week. He's shown flashes of great athleticism and hands in an offense that loves to target their tight ends heavily in the passing game. Martellus Bennett should be back this week, but I give him a C. He's still in recovery mode, and it may take him a bit to work his way back in and be productive like he was earlier in the season. I've always said Bennett is one of the league's best fantasy tight ends between September 1st and September 30th. After that, extremely mediocre.
Yeah, trade on the high notes apparently, right?
Right.
Jaguars Titans quarterback Blake Bortles. He has been quite, just kind of going all over the place. He's kind of settling down, but then he goes up, he's settling down. Now he's going against a really good pass defense, so his 13 picks are likely to get worse. C+ for Blake Bortles. Running back TJ Yeldon here. I guess he would be a decent start and an average grade of a B. He's going to go against that middle of the road run defense here against the Titans. They're not going to have a lot of success. I love seeing this team play. I love seeing what they can do, but I think they're going to go up against this tough pass defense, and it's really going to struggle. They're really going to hurt. Wide receiver Allen Robinson, B-. He's likely going to see most of that coverage with Hearns not being able to go because of his concussion. If he does, give Hearns a B-, but it's really close. I don't think he's going to be able to make it. Stay tuned for the bargain bin if they don't, because we're going to have some awesome pickups there. Tight end Julius Thomas. Ding, ding, ding. Watch out for this. He might get 10 targets in this game, as they're going to need to move those chains. They're going to have to do it in a creative way. I'm going to give Julius Thomas a B for some good yardage and maybe even a sneak touchdown. Quarterback Marcus Mariota, B+. While they surely threw up a stinker last week, it also has some pouring rain, and I gave some really bad advice to a guy out on Twitter, so I apologize. Sorry, man. The rain just screwed that entire game up. Running back Antonio Andrews, C+. The guy is just not the answer, and the Titans are surely in the need for drafting a running back here on this next draft in 2016. Wide receiver Kendall Wright. He's technically the number one wide receiver. Let's hope he can get back to playing like it because Mariota really needs him to be back. So a B for Wright. Harry Douglas, C+, and DGB is going to get a C. Tight end Delaney Walker. He's your A. If you're going to pick any A in this matchup, it's got to be tight end Delaney Walker. I just love this guy. He's just playing football and making magic on the field. He's definitely saved Mariota's season from being a total disaster. Look for him to do the same. He has 200 yards in 2 games.
Get ready for the pop quiz, Brian. It's coming up after Houston at Buffalo. On the Texans side, Brian Hoyer is a B. Buffalo isn't nearly as good against the pass as their reputation would suggest. They allow over 250 yards per game through the air. They've given up 20 passing touchdowns on the season. Hoyer should have enough attempts to make him a worthwhile dart throw if you need one this week. Alfred Blue is a C. He's on the injury report, but it sounds like he's going to play this week. Almost feel like taking a shower, I got to be honest, after endorsing a Texans running back this week. The truth of the matter regarding the Bills is this. They're not nearly as great on the defensive side of the ball, and that includes against the run, as everyone seems to think they are. Granted, they've only allowed 8 rushing touchdowns on the season, but they're very middle of the pack in terms of yardage. Blue is a flex at best. Jonathan Grimes barely startable grade of C- because he contributes in the passing grade, or in the passing game, I should say. DeAndre Hopkins is an A. Not that you'd consider it, but you can't bench this guy. Cecil Shorts is a C+. I like the variety of ways Houston is getting him the ball, even if it is at the expense of the guy I think is the more talented receiver, Nate Washington. I give him a C. His field time drastically hurt by Shorts' presence, but when he's on the field, he has the potential to put one up. No tight end of note for Houston, so we move on to the Bills side and Tyrod Taylor, a C. In standard scoring leagues since Week 8, nobody has been tougher on opposing quarterbacks than the Texans have, who have given up an average of less than 9.5 fantasy points per game to the position in their last 4 games. Houston is riding a hot streak, and I'm not betting against them this week. LaShawn McCoy is a B+. Houston is really no better or worse against the run than the Bills are, but McCoy is a far superior talent in comparison to any of the options on the other side of the ball. I like him a lot in this game, especially considering he's either topped 100 yards and or scored in his last 8 games. That's fantastic. Boobie Dixon is active. I'm leaving him on the bench. Sammy Watkins, a B. Total head scratcher last week. Following a stinker versus New England the week prior, Watkins looked like the best receiver in the league last week against a very tough Chiefs defense in their house. With flashes like that, who would bench him? I wouldn't. Robert Woods is a C. He's a mediocre play at best this week. Tight end Charles Clay, I'm leaving on the bench. All right, Brian, you ready for the pop quiz?
Let's do it.
3 tough questions. Here we go. Question number 1. We fast forward to next summer and your 2016 fantasy football draft. Brian, who's the overall number 1 pick in a standard scoring redraft?
I was not expecting this question at all.
Ha!
Oh, you want to instinctively look towards running backs, but they're either throwing up yards and no touchdowns, or nothing but touchdowns and no yards. I am going to take God, you can't take Antonio Brown 1. He's the most consistent out there because he's the one not getting hurt. Adrian Peterson, is he really going to do the same thing again this year? Man, that is a tough question.
Ha-ha.
Man, that I will say, man, this sucks. I'm just going to say AP because I think he's the only one who you can say now that is going to be starting as an all-time back. because beast mode, if he's gone, you could look at someone like Thomas Rawls if they let him go. If you look, Forte could be gone, so that's open up opportunities. There's just so many variables going into this offseason. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
Several correct answers here, believe it or not. No quarterbacks, but at running back, Adrian Peterson, certainly a viable option. So is Devontae Freeman, in my opinion. At wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones are my top two contestants there. And at tight end, Rob Gronkowski. There's not enough differentiation among quarterbacks. Hopkins is interesting choice because he's doing it with extremely mediocre talent throwing him the ball. He can only improve his output, in other words. Peterson has virtually zero competition and has been putting up his numbers without the threat of much of a passing game. For me, it really comes down to those two guys. Comes down to Peterson and Hopkins, and I choose Purple Jesus.
Yeah, I knew you would.
Antonio Brown I like, but here's the problem. If something happens to Big Ben, which it has this season, Antonio Brown's value goes way down. It plummets.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. That's why it's hard.
Risk management with the top picks. Number 2, Brian, with the firing of offensive coordinator Bill Lazor in Miami, the existing coaching staff insist they're recommitting themselves to establishing the running game. The over-under on touchdowns for Lamar Miller between now and Week 17 is 4. Are you betting on the over, the under, or a push?
I'll go with over just because that's under 1 a game. I don't know without looking at the stats who their opponents are. So I'm just kind of doing this one in the dark. I would just go with over because you would think they're trying to save their job. If you're now the interim coach, you're going to hand it off 20 times a game to Lamar Miller, regardless. You don't have a choice anymore because if you don't, you're getting fired.
The answer is a push. Not only do the Dolphins have an extremely friendly schedule in 3 of their last 5 games, matching up against the Ravens, who are number 7 against the run, the Giants, who are 17th, Chargers 32nd, Colts 25th, and Patriots 9th. Miller can succeed not only as a runner but also a pass catcher. The only thing in his way is rookie Jay Ajayi, who has earned some snaps. I say Miller scores 4 touchdowns between now and the end of the season.
All right, put it up on the board.
Question number 3. A yes or no is all I want from you. Has Peyton Manning taken his last NFL snap?
Yes, regardless of what the Broncos are saying right now.
Sorry, I'm going to have to give you a check mark on that one because you didn't answer correctly. I was looking for one word.
Yes.
The answer is yes. Peyton Manning's done. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
That whole junk coming out of there, well, they're refuting reports that he's taken. Yes, he has. Yes, he has. Quit being ridiculous and just dodge the question instead of saying, no, he hasn't. Terrible.
All right, Brian, back into the matchups, my friend.
And I'm up, aren't I?
You are.
All right, so let's do the Ravens-Dolphins. It's going to be probably the quickest matchup in 5-on-5 fantasy football history. Quarterback Matt Schaub, B- only because it's the Miami's defense. Wasn't much showing out of him last week, but good enough to give him a B- against Miami. Running back Buck Allen, B. If the Ravens want to win another game, they're going to need to feed him 40 times, but it's never going to happen because they're not even feeding him more than 10 times, it seems like. It's just that play calling in that offense. You don't want any part of it, and the running backs are suffering. He got lucky, got that touchdown. We'll see if he does it again. Wide receiver Kamar Aiken, he's a B+ here. He's the only one to throw to and the only one who's catching passes, so he's at least going to have the opportunity. And how many weeks has Steve Smith been out? Andy, do you know, 4 or 5?
Yeah, I want to say it's like 5 or 6 at this point.
Yeah, 5 or 6. Did you know he's still the leading receiver on the Ravens roster?
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah. Is that not just total garbage? So, yeah, a guy who's been out for half of the season is still the leading receiver. Crazy. Tight end Crockett Gilmore, he has a chance to get some balls, so let's give him a B-. On the Dolphins side, quarterback Ryan Tannehill, he gets his 3rd offensive coordinator of the year. You think at some point they just say, do whatever you want, draw some plays up in the huddle, and just go for it. Because worst case scenario, he's not going to get it. They're not going to be any worse than what they are. So I'm going to give a B+ to Tannehill because it is the Ravens, and their pass defense is terrible. So I would look for him to make his own statement this week. Running back Lamar Miller, hopefully going to get More than a handful of carries, B plus for Miller here. Should get plenty of them because the game flow of the Finns should be up 2 scores at half. Wide receiver Jarvis Landry, big ticket here this week. We called him at the beginning of the season. It's working out well, B plus. Wide receiver Kenny Still, C plus. Tight end Jordan Cameron, C at best. It's just not the tight end kind of offense here, and you would think they're looking for the big plays downfield.
Cincinnati at Cleveland. On the Bengals side, Andy Dalton is a B+. Cleveland are a quarterback-friendly matchup, allowing 265 yards passing per game and over 2 touchdowns via the air as well. With Dalton's arsenal of weapons, expect all that and possibly more like he did when he fleeced the Browns in Week 8 for 234 and 3. Giovanni Bernard is an A. The Browns rank 31st in yards per game to opposing running backs and have allowed 9 rushing touchdowns on the season. Jeremy Hill may miss this week. He tweaked his ankle last week. Bernard, either way, I think is in line for the lion's share of the workload and a very big game on Sunday. A.J. Green is a B+. He's on a roll, and especially if Joe Hayden misses another week with his concussion issues, Green should have a nice game against one of the league's worst defenses against the pass. Marvin Jones, a B-. Nice compliment to Green. Jones should be on Dalton's radar a decent amount of times. Tyler Eifert, depending on whether or not he plays. If he plays, I give him a B+. He's a must-start every week if he's active, and this is a good matchup. On the Browns side, Austin Davis is your starting quarterback. I'm going to leave him on the bench. This is a terrible matchup for the Browns passing game in general. For the backs, Duke Johnson is a B. Despite a tough matchup, Duke should see enough volume to warrant strong flex consideration. He did score through the air in the team's first matchup a few weeks back. Isaiah Crowell, I'm leaving on the bench. He's been awful. Travis Benjamin is a B-, usually a good yardage play, even in tough matchups. I wouldn't count on a score from him here, but he is capable of surprising you. Brian Hartline, a C. He's a warm body if you need a flex. Gary Barnidge is a B. No-brainer no matter who the quarterback happens to be, but you got to temper your expectations. The Bengals were one of the only defenses able to slow Barnidge back in Week 8.
On to the Chiefs-Raiders. Quarterback Alex Smith, he's on a little bit of a hot streak here. The Chiefs keep on winning somehow. Smith's going to get himself a B+, as he's going to have a decent supporting crew back to full health. Running back Charkandrick West practiced in full on Wednesday, so he should be good to go. That's great news. However, you're going to want to make sure to check on those hammies because you never know if he's going to tweak it in warm-ups or something like that, so pay attention on Sunday. Wide receiver Jeremy Maclin, he's going to get a B+, the only receiver who gets after the ball and is the leading wide receiver by 300% over the second. It's crazy. He's got like 700 and some yards, and the next guy has 200 and some change. So it's ridiculous at the gap in some of these teams. Tight end Travis Kelce, the only Chiefs pass catcher to start all 11 previous games. And his 12% of the targets will get an A in the tight end spot here, as I expect him to haul in a touchdown this week. On the Raiders side of the ball, quarterback Derek Carr, he gets a chance to put out the Chiefs' hot streak with a B of his own. The Chiefs are playing really well. I think they're making their final push, hoping for that outside chance at a wild card. Running back Latavius Murray, I'm going to give him an average B. I don't think anyone on the Raiders is going to have a crazy good day, more so that all of their people are going to have an average day. Wide receiver Amari Cooper, B+, big and tall and always getting him the ball. He's been held out of the end zone in his last 3 games, so he's probably due. Wide receiver Michael Crabtree, B-, while Crabapples has been the go-to lately. It's going to shift back to Cooper this game. It's just a hunch. No tight end of fantasy value is on the Raiders roster.
Denver at San Diego. On the Broncos side, Brock Osweiler is a B+. The Chargers are a middle-of-the-road defense against the pass. Osweiler has a full boat of weapons here. He's looked solid since Manning stepped aside. C.J. Anderson's a B+. His game has done a 180 the past few weeks, to the point where he probably deserves even more field time than he's been getting. The Chargers are the league's most fantasy-friendly defense versus opposing running backs. You gotta love this matchup. For that reason, Ronnie Hillman also in play. He's a B here. Despite the nature of the backfield split, Hillman still contributes both running and catching the ball, so I kind of like him too. Demaryius Thomas is an A. The Chargers have given up 18 touchdowns to opposing pass catchers on the season. Thomas should be good for at least one this week in a good matchup. Emmanuel Sanders, a B. If the Broncos score more than one through the air, it could very well be Sanders that is the recipient of at least one of them. He looked very solid in his return last week. As far as tight end goes, Owen Daniels probably your best bet, but I only gave him a C. The Chargers haven't been very good versus opposing tight ends overall this season, but Daniels can't be counted on to help you win this week or any week for that matter. He's too big a dart throw. On the Chargers side, Phillip Rivers, a C+. We all know what Denver is capable of in terms of team defense. Rivers has the ability to put up serviceable numbers, but lacks the quantity of formidable weapons in order to make it happen. He's a below-average start this week. Danny Woodhead is a B-. He's a flex play only this week due to the dual-threat nature of his game. I think he warrants some consideration. Melvin Gordon, on the other hand, I'm leaving on the bench. San Diego is trying to get him his first touchdown. That's apparent, but I'm not willing to bet it'll happen this week. Stevie Johnson, a C+. He probably sees a lot of Chris Harris here, which doesn't bode well for his chances. Hey, Brian, guess how many touchdowns the Denver Broncos have allowed to wide receivers this season?
5.
The answer's 1.
Oh, wow. Really?
One wide receiver has scored a touchdown all season against the Broncos. I'll buy you lunch if you can tell me who scored it.
Calvin Johnson.
Mike Wallace.
Wow, that's terrible.
I know. Crazy, right? So, needless to say, I'm not in love with the wide receivers at all for the Chargers. Malcolm Floyd and Dontrell Inman are both getting C- from me. One of these two have a chance to see some open space and gain some decent yardage if the volume's there. The trouble is, it's impossible to say which of them has the better shot. You're better off finding another option. Antonio Gates probably gets Aqib Talib in coverage. He's been extremely good this season, both against wide receivers and tight ends. But because Gates always seems to find a way, and tight ends have had some success against the Broncos, I give Gates a B- this week.
Eagles-Patriots, Bradford or Sanchez, doesn't really matter at this point. The Eagles are in full-fledged disaster. Whichever QB goes, it's a C+. You probably shouldn't even be starting them anyways. Even if you are in desperation, I hear there's a new guy starting for the Browns. Running back DeMarco Murray, quite possibly the biggest first-round bust now that the season's played out. He's had 30 yards on 13 attempts last week, which is just terrible. The Patriots don't mess around. While they do give up yards, they don't particularly give up those touchdowns. 10th fewest fantasy points from running backs. Wide receiver Jordan Matthews, B. All of his scoring games come in garbage time. So the stat sheet lies on this wide receiver, folks. You got to look at the whole game. Wide receiver Michael Huff, he at least gets a TD here and there, although he hasn't had more than 40 yards in 6 weeks. So I'm going to give a C to Huff. Tight end Zach Ertz, if he goes, give him a C as well, but it's likely he won't. Quarterback Tom Brady, he's losing people to throw the ball to, and it's starting to catch up with him and the team. I will give a B+ for Brady because it is the Eagles. He does have some options, hopefully, that are still healthy. Even after the loss of Gronk here, he's going to be back soon, so don't worry. Running back LeGarrette Blount, he's surely going to get a full workload and probably going to need some breaks, so stay tuned to the bargain bin. Watch for this to transition to him. Start him all the way across the board. Wide receiver Brandon LaFell, he needs to get his hands in action, step up in a big way. A B+ for LaFell and a B for Amendola if he goes. I think they're really going to make a push for him to go, so stay tuned there. Tight end Scott Chandler, good old Iowa Hawkeye alum, he's going to get his share of the looks, and he's going to earn himself a B now with Gronk out.
Boy, how matchup proof is Tom Brady?
You know, he is.
Dude, he lost his best pass-catching back in Deion Lewis. He lost his best receiver, arguably, in Julian Edelman. He lost Danny Amendola for a bit. And now he lost Rob Gronkowski for at least a week. But he still goes up against the league's best pass defense, actually best defense in general, Denver. And though the team lost, he looked studly.
Yeah. It's just
something else.
It just goes down to that whole franchise. It's how they prepare week in, week out. They build depth at their roster, and they only have people who want to play football.
My next matchup, Carolina at New Orleans. Start on the Panthers side. Cam Newton is an A. Repeat the mantra. There is no better matchup for a quarterback than the New Orleans Saints. There is no better matchup for a quarterback than the New Orleans Saints. He threw for 315 yards and 2 touchdowns while also adding a rushing touchdown in the team's last meeting. So you got to love him here. I don't think there's anybody I'd start over him besides maybe Tom Brady. Jonathan Stewart is an A. The Saints allow over 130 yards rushing per game, much of which should end up in Jay Stu's final stat line. Only 8 rushing touchdowns have been scored on them, however, so a score isn't a guarantee here, but I do like his chances due to game flow. Devin Funchess is a B. He's getting more looks in recent weeks. He's producing decent wide receiver 2 or maybe flex numbers in an offense that is typically run first. Ted Ginn, a B. He's always a threat if he can just hang on to the ball. He had success against this secondary in their first matchup this season. Philly Brown, he'll get a C here. Should return from injury this week just in time to face the league's most fantasy-friendly pass defense that has allowed a league-high 30 passing touchdowns on the season. Looking at tight end, I think this is pretty obvious. Greg Olsen pretty much always gets an A. He went off on these Saints back in their Week 2 matchup, 134 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Yes, please, put him in the lineup. On the Saints side, Drew Brees, a C+. The Panthers are the only defense in the league with more interceptions than touchdowns yielded. Despite the friendly surroundings for Brees and company, they're playing at home. This is an extremely tough matchup that could produce maybe some garbage time stat padding, but ultimately a big risk to your fantasy lineup. I'd steer clear. Mark Ingram gets a B. Opposing runners are averaging less than 4 yards per carry against the Panthers, who rank 3rd in the league in yards allowed. Ingram needs at least 20 carries to consider him in your lineup, and I'm not certain he'll get that, especially if the Panthers build a comfortable lead. He did have nearly 100 combo yards and a score earlier this season, though, to his credit. C.J. Spiller, I'm leaving on the bench. Brandon Cooks, a B-. If Josh Norman shadows him, it'll be a very long day for Cooks. The hope for his owners is that he moves around enough in the formation to avoid that shadow coverage. Marcus Colston, a C, below average wide receiver option for the week. This is an incredibly difficult matchup. Benjamin Watson is a B-. If there's one Saints pass catcher I'd feel decent about this week, it's Watson. On several occasions this season, the Panthers have allowed opposing tight ends into the end zone.
Colts Steelers, quarterback Matt Hasselbeck, he's proved that he can throw the ball to anybody that's around there. Just a bunch of different receivers moving the chains. I'm for one who kind of wrote the Colts receivers off on this here. He's going to get a B. But he's just really finding ways to get it done. And we kind of talked about a while ago that the Colts simplified their playbook for him, and it's working. It's working great. Running back Frank Gore, he's back to being on his own again against a Steeler team that gives up a few points to the running back position. So math with Gore, match that with Gore's 5 most touches in the league. We go back, we talked about it earlier, that whole pitch count thing. It's just not going to work out for Gore. I think he's really just wearing down. So B- for Gore. Wide receiver T.Y. Hilton, B+, as we talked about. The guy had 2 touchdowns last week. Hasselbeck is making it worth. Good grief Moncrief. He's going to get a B. 115 yards last week. They're just getting it done. Hasselbeck has proven that you can start him. He is going to get you average points for a quarterback. No tight end of value on the fantasy roster on the Colts. Big Ben, hopefully, fingers crossed, is back, going through the whole, does he have a concussion, doesn't he, this, that, and the other thing. He's going through the protocol. He feels great. He has no nauseous. He's no headaches, nothing like that. So I'm going to expect him to be back in there. And if he is, I'm going to give an A to Big Ben. Something tells me that they're going to keep him upright, and he is going to just start cutting these people up. Pretty much the whole Steelers roster is getting an A here. Running back to Angelo Williams, A+. He always gets those yards. He always gets those touchdowns, and you got a soft team right now. They're going to be up. They're just going to dish it. Wide receiver Antonio Brown, I'm going to give a B+. Only reason is because I think his supporting cast is playing so well, and they're going to spread the wealth. He's going to get his own, but he won't get the targets like he used to. Wide receiver Martavis Bryant, B+ if he plays. watch the Friday practice report. He's been stepping up in huge ways, so they will likely want to get him out there. So watch that report. If he doesn't go, look for Wheaton to have a significant leap in fantasy value up to a B for himself if Bryant doesn't. It would be huge to snag him off your waiver wire right now if you can spare the room, just in case that Friday report comes out and Martavis Bryant sits. Tight end Heath Miller, he didn't practice on Wednesday either. Watch it close, but if he does play, give him a C+, B- right in there. You get those yards, probably no touchdowns. If Heath Miller doesn't go, there's no tight end of value on the Steelers roster.
I think Wheaton's fool's gold.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, even Coach Tomlin came out and said he wouldn't expect that again. Hey, way to show some faith in your guy there, Mike.
Yeah, no kidding.
The Monday Nighter is Dallas at Washington. On the Cowboys side, Matt Castle back under center. Give him a B- in this matchup. Washington allows an average of 240 passing yards per game. They've given up 22 passing touchdowns on the season, and home field advantage means nothing to their secondary. I looked into it. They've surrendered 11 scores at home and 11 on the road. So
Perfect.
Castle isn't a strong fantasy play, but has enough weapons to consider him if you're in the most desperate of circumstances. Darren McFadden is a B. The Cowboys will want to establish the running game in this matchup and shouldn't have much of an issue against the Redskins, who give up the 5th most yards to opposing backs. But on the season, they've only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns. But that's kind of been McFadden's MO here recently, as he's getting some yardage and a lot of touches, but he's not getting in the end zone. Dez Bryant is a B+. We've seen the regression of Dez when anyone but Tony Romo is under center, but with the division still up for grabs, you better believe there will be a special effort made to get the ball into his hands in a big divisional matchup like this. Cole Beasley is a C+, a short and intermediate route runner with enough quicks to find open space, which should result in a decent amount of opportunity. Terrence Williams, I'm leaving on the bench. He'll do his usual disappearing act now that Tony Romo is no longer active. Jason Witten, I'm going to give a B2 in this game. He really didn't have a great game against the Skins earlier on this season, but to be quite honest with you, Jason Witten is a guy that a backup quarterback will always be looking for, so I give him a pretty decent grade here. Kirk Cousins is a B-. Dallas has given up half the passing touchdowns Washington has, only 11 on the season. They're an incredibly stingy defense, and opposing quarterbacks typically don't score more than 17, 18 fantasy points per game in standard leagues. Alfred Morris is a B. Dallas is a middle-of-the-road defense in terms of yardage per game yielded to opposing runners, but have given up 11 rushing touchdowns on the season. Good opportunity for Morris and company here for at least one. Matt Jones, a C-. Jones took a back seat to Morris in Week 12, only carrying the ball 8 times for 19 yards. And while he did snag one reception that went for 45 yards, that's not something you can count on from him, not to mention he's had major ball security issues. The receivers, Deshaun Jackson is a B+. He should be one of the team's top 2 targets throughout the game, despite the matchup. Jackson has enough elusiveness and quickness to get behind a defense for a long touchdown at any time. We've seen it time and time again from this guy. Jamison Crowder is a C. He should see more targets this week against a tough Dallas defense that will want to avoid giving up the long ball. Crowder is the short route runner that relies on yards after the catch to earn his stat line. The tight end, Pierre Garçon, I'll throw in as a desperation flex, C-. Generally good for 4 to 6 targets per week. He's not enough to really warrant much fantasy consideration, but if you really need somebody, Pierre Garçon could work in a pinch. Jordan Reed is a B+. I think he's kind of a no-brainer. Again, this is a really tough matchup, but Jordan Reed's been pretty much money all season long for the Redskins. That wraps up Monday Night Football, Brian. We've got a few minutes here to hit the bargain bin, and maybe we'll hit a little more of this Peyton Manning situation after that.
Sure.
The bargain bin, by the way, here's a segment of the show where we give you a quarterback, a running back, and a pass catcher. And a lot of these guys you can find right on the waiver wire. Just go pick them up. Like right now, most of your waivers have already cleared. Go pick these guys up, plug them in if you need somebody, and they could surprise the heck out of you, make you look like a genius.
All right, let's do it. Let's kick it off quarterbacks here. This week I went with Marcus Mariota. Likely a lot of people dropped him through their bye weeks. They figured he was no longer serviceable, but they are playing Jacksonville. He has Delaney Walker and his number one wide receiver back. He's not going to be stellar, but if you've got one of those quarterbacks who are no longer playing or they're playing a tough matchup, you might want to look at Mariota.
I am amazed that Ryan Fitzpatrick is not 100% owned in fantasy leagues, Brian.
He's going to have a day. He's going to have a day.
He has one of the most favorable schedules of any NFL quarterback going forward. It begins with in-state rival the Giants, who are 27th in the league against opposing signal callers, giving up over 23 fantasy points per game on average in standard scoring formats. Did I mention his schedule is amazing all the way into the playoffs?
You didn't mention the beard, though.
Yeah, well, the reason I didn't mention the beard is because he shaved it.
Oh, that's right.
He's down to just stubble now.
Terrible. I'm not picking him up now.
I want to call him the old crusty sea captain.
Yeah.
They need to give him like a Captain and Tennille, captain hat.
Or he comes out with a parrot on. That'd be sweet.
And an eye patch and maybe a pipe. Anyway, go ahead with your running back.
On to running back, James White. If the Patriots can't get the passing game going quick enough, Blunt's going to need to rotate with somebody. He can't carry it 30 or 40 times a game. So watch for White here. He can catch passes, too, and assist in that department.
It's funny. Bolden's been the guy scoring the touchdowns, but White has been getting a lot of field time, and it's only a matter of time before he ends up in the end zone. This could be the week, Brian, for sure. My running back's Alfred Morris. He seems to have reestablished himself as Washington's bell cow back. He gets a Dallas defense on Monday that has allowed 11 rushing scores on the season, as I mentioned a bit ago. And not surprisingly, I guess, a lot of people had already dropped Alfred Morris. He might be on your waiver wire right now.
Yeah, I actually just seen him get picked up in a couple of my leagues this morning. So I think you sent my leagues who your bargain bin was, so they'd screw me over.
I might have given him a heads up. Maybe. Who's your pass catcher this week?
All right. Well, hey, he's something that's been coming on. It's offensive play calling here. Wide receiver Lance Moore, the Detroit Lions. He's a sneaky little bugger. He's been snagging them valuable catches away from Golden Tate and has more touchdowns than Tate does. He has those more yards per catch. So watch out. I think Lance Moore is a viable option here.
I'm going tight end, and I'm going Cameron Brate, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Falcons are a plus matchup for opposing tight ends, and not many have been as hot as Brate in the past few weeks. And assuming Austin Seferian-Jenkins continues his stint in the witness relocation program, should be a good start again this week. Cameron Brate, not a guy that most people are running to their waiver for because of the lack of name recognition, Brian, but he's a guy that simply scores touchdowns. He's very productive. Jameis Winston seems to really like him and goes to him often in the red zone.
I definitely agree. I think he's someone that really snuck up on everybody, and it's working out for him well.
I think we got like 60 seconds here. Give me a good reason why Peyton Manning is finished.
There's no point. They can't risk the playoff spot. They can't risk the seeding. Brock Osweiler has been holding up very well. He's been throwing up better statistics than Peyton Manning. So why would you pull him out?
Because he's a legend, Brian. Why wouldn't you put him back in there?
Because if you miss the playoffs because you lose 3 or 4 more games, the AFC is tough. Their wild cards are high, so it's going to be a good competition, and I wouldn't want to mess with it. One question that I do want to throw out there for all of our listeners is that if anyone wants to really get involved in social media but doesn't know how or have the time to, let me throw you this question. Do you like it when your fantasy football players have to play on Monday night? Do you hate the wait? Do you hate running through scenarios in your head? Or do you like it to get that come from behind victory?
It's a very good point. And I actually was just being devil's advocate because I think Peyton Manning I think his career is over now at this point. So that's my opinion. Hey, if you missed any part of the show, feel free to revisit anytime via iTunes, Stitcher, or the Libsyn website. If we've helped you in any way, shape, or form, let us know by leaving a review and or rating the 515 Fantasy Football Show. We thank you for that in advance. Leading up to kickoff, Brian and I always happy to answer any lineup questions you may have on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, Twitter at 515 Fantasy, or via email 515fantasy at gmail.com. Again, we appreciate you taking a listen. We wish you not only the best of luck here in Week 13, but a very happy and healthy weekend. For Brian Eikenberry, I'm Andy Hall. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show.